Welcome to the Week 6 running back tier list. Today I'm going to be breaking down my top 36 running back rankings so we can all set our fantasy football lineups, going through major usage trends, injuries. We got a lot of them this week because there's a whole lot of injuries going on at the running back position. If you guys enjoy at any point, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now let's get into it. All right, so we are going to kick things off with the bye weeks. We have a couple teams on bye this week, so you will not have any Pittsburgh Steelers, nor will you have any Green Bay Packers. So Aaron Jones, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, and A.J. Dillon all on bye this week. Also, maybe consider selling Jones. I've seen a couple fantasy doctors point out the fact that his advanced age, it sounds like he re-aggravated that hamstring injury, and they're not convinced that he's just going to be back in the lineup as normal after the bye week. So maybe while he's on bye and out of sight, out of mind, maybe you can get a decent value off of him for name value. So we do have a couple running backs that suffered major injuries in the past week that are going to be out multiple games. So I'll touch on that right now. Devon Achane will be out multiple weeks with what fantasy doctors are speculating is a grade 2 MCL strain or MCL sprain. The Dolphins have their bye week in week 10. So Devon Achane won't actually be back into your fantasy football lineups for 5 weeks, 4 games in total, but the Dolphins have their bye in week 10, like I said. So he won't be back for a while. Obviously Jeff Wilson was a big waiver pickup this week, although he won't be playing this week. James Conner was placed on IR as well. Likely the same injury as Achane with what people are speculating as grade 1.5, grade 2 MCL tear is what the fantasy doctors are talking about. Amari DiMercado and Keontae Ingram obviously were both hot waiver adds this past week. And then Khalil Herbert suffered a high ankle sprain last Thursday in the win over the Commanders. He is officially on IR. He was put over there this morning, so he's going to be out for the next 4 games as well. We do have a number of will they plays to talk about, so I'm just getting started with these running back injuries. So the first will they play, this one's a legitimate question mark here. We have Saquon Barkley, who had 3 limited practices in a row. Fantasy doctors seem nervous about his health still. To be honest, Daniel Jones is out. Most of their offensive line is out. I would, if I was the Giants, probably just hold out Saquon for one more game, keep him healthy, and take your ass kicking from the Buffalo Bills because you're probably not going to beat them anyway without your offensive line and your starting quarterback. So what's the point of playing Saquon Barkley? Give him one more week to get healthy. Then we have a couple guys who have already officially been ruled out. We have Miles Sanders, who is out Sunday versus Miami with a shoulder injury. We have Roschon Johnson, who is officially ruled out with a concussion. So Herbert, Johnson, both out. Looks like it's going to be the Deontay Foreman show. Then we have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's also been ruled out with a hamstring pull. This is why I was not buying low on him. Me and Danny discussed this on Wednesday, and I was worried about Jahmyr Gibbs for a number of reasons, but the injury was definitely one of them as well. I've seen some projections saying, by week 7, week 8, he'll be 100%, and that does not bode well for his fantasy value. We still don't have official word that Jeff Wilson will be active or not. He is listed as doubtful, so I would imagine it is going to be the Raheem Mostert show. So that is the majority of the injuries that we're going to talk about. I'll touch on a couple more of them when we actually get into the running back tier list itself. But let's kick things off with the locked-in running back starts. So my top 12 running backs every week, we kind of just breeze over these guys because we know they have good usage. We know they have good, profiles and that kind of thing. All of these guys are in your lineup as far as who could overperform and who could underperform. A couple of these guys that have really good matchups this week, we have Raheem Mostert, Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, and Isaiah Pacheco, who already played on Thursday night. Those guys are all in good matchups according to our matchup charts, which of course you can get by signing up over on Flock Fantasy. Link will be down below in the description for that. And then elite running backs in high-scoring games, we have Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, and then on Monday night, Tony Pollard and Austin Eckler. All of these game environments could be conducive to points, which is good news for our fantasy running backs. And then some elite running backs that are in bad matchups. We have Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, and David Montgomery. So even though it's a high-scoring game potentially for Austin Eckler, not a good matchup against the Cowboys' run defense. And usually I like to highlight a guy or two from this tier to highlight, the recent usage trends and that kind of thing. We're going to go all the way up to the RB2. Bijan Robinson for me. Weeks 3 and 4, we saw the Falcons get basically blown out against the Lions and the Jaguars respectively. And the usage for the Falcons backfield looked a lot different as a result of that. Last week against the Houston Texans, it was a close game throughout. We saw a whole lot more of Tyler Algier in this backfield because the Falcons weren't getting boat raced. So keep that in mind when it comes to when you can start Tyler Algier, when we want to limit expectations a little bit for Bijan Robinson. When the Falcons are down, they're going to use Bijan Robinson more because he is the long down and distance running back. He is the pass catching running back of this team. If this game is close, which it should be against the Washington Commanders this week, then we're probably going to see a more of a backfield split with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Definitely going to be more of an even match game this week. David Montgomery, who is my RB7, is the other guy I want to highlight from this top tier. With David Montgomery, you guys can see that last week in the game that Jahmyr Gibbs was not playing, you can see that he had a 75% snap share. He ran a season high in route participation, and he got most of the long down and distance snaps, which of course would normally go to Jahmyr Gibbs. So definitely a matchup upgrade for David Montgomery. Without Jahmyr Gibbs in the lineup, he's actually going to have a bigger role as a pass catcher. So for me, he's a top 7 running back. You could even make the argument potentially that he should be higher in this game this week against the Buccaneers, but it is a tougher matchup against a tough run defense. So let's get into the high-end RB2 tier. These are more so the guys that we have to decide between when it comes to running back starts and sits and that kind of thing. We're going to kick it off with Alvin Kamara, running back 13 for me. Kendre Miller's usage last week was kind of eye-opening for Alvin Kamara. But I will say it may have just been a result of them absolutely destroying the New England Patriots last week. They were up by a lot of points. It looks like they gave their rookie a little bit more run than maybe we're used to. But Kendre Miller did look good in that limited action, so it's possible that they work him more into the backfield. Just keep that in mind with Alvin Kamara. I still think he's a sell high at this point in time because he's an older running back, and I think he's lost a step efficiency-wise. But the Texans are a top 7 matchup for fantasy running backs this week, so it should be a very good week for Alvin Kamara. Maybe you sell him after this game, which would be his 3rd good game in a row, and you could probably get one of the better running backs in fantasy in exchange for Alvin Kamara on the open market. So running back 14 for me in my rankings is Kyren Williams. I think this game could be a monster performance for Kyren Williams. The Cardinals are 30th ranked team against fantasy running backs, so we're looking at a very, very good matchup for a guy with a monster workload. The Rams are implied for over 27 points in this game. Maybe this workload isn't going to last the whole season. I feel like I say this every week about Kyren Williams. I'm kind of just pissed I didn't spend more fab on this guy because I'm really shocked at what he's doing and how many touchdowns he's been able to score. And the fact that he's getting everything under the sun in his backfield. I really didn't think that was going to happen, but it is definitely the case right now. So running back 15 for me in my rankings is James Cook. Could be a heavy dose of the run in this game. The Buffalo Bills are 15.5-point favorites as the time I'm recording this versus Tyrod Taylor and the New York Giants, who have no offensive line and maybe without Saquon Barkley as well. Like I said, I would probably hold out Saquon if I was them. This could be over at halftime, this game. Buffalo Bills have destroyed bad teams so far this year, and the Giants might be the worst team that they've played so far, which is saying a lot about the Washington Commanders and the Raiders that they've played. The James Cook wave is one that you got to ride. He's not going to be a guy that is going to be week over week consistent because, he's just not a superstar talent, right? He's in a great offense. He's a good player, but he's not the focal point of the Buffalo Bills attack. Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are the focal point of this attack. So there's going to be games where James Cook disappears. He doesn't get a whole lot of touches or, doesn't find the end zone or whatever the case is. But James Cook has a pretty good matchup in this game against the Giants, and it's going to be a really good game script where they're going to probably be running out the clock in the second half of this game. So James Cook, definitely a solid start this week. Then we have Joe Mixon, running back 16 on my rankings here. Joe Mixon's meh as a player. You guys know I've never really been a fan of his. But the Bengals appear to be back, right? We saw a big time bounce back from Joe Burrow this past week, and Jamar Chase obviously went nuclear. This game against Seattle could be a sneaky shootout. I actually really like the over in this game if you guys are betting on it. So I like Mixon to have a patented 20 touches where he's very inefficient, but he finds the end zone once or twice to save the day. So from a fantasy perspective, I think you can count on Joe Mixon this week as a solid RB2. Then we get into Breece Hall here. 25 opportunities for Breece Hall last week. Definitely feels good if you guys roster him. The snap share and the routes still have room to grow. You guys can see some of the snap share numbers that he's been putting up this season have not really been there yet, but he did have 52% of the snaps this past week. Zach Wilson posted his 2nd straight game with over a 70% completion percentage, and he had 7.7 yards per attempt against the Broncos. So things appear to be getting better for Zach Wilson and the Jets offense, but they do have a tall task this week against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are nobody's pushover. They're probably the best team in the NFC, if not the second best to the 49ers. Hopefully the Zach Wilson mentals can keep up. Because if he has like a big time loss where they get blown out by 40 points or something like that, that's not going to be good for the guy's confidence. And we've kind of seen that when Zach Wilson's playing well and he's playing confidently, he can actually like move the ball on offense. And that's good for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. But this is the third best defense in the NFL against fantasy running backs for Breece Hall. So I don't think he's a must start. If you have great options at wide receiver, like a Jordan Addison or something like that, who's like, high end wide receiver 2 this week, then I would maybe sit Breece Hall in favor of guys like that. So running back 18 for me, closing out this tier, is Jonathan Taylor. We got a report from head coach Shane Steichen that Jonathan Taylor will get more work this week. How much more is really the question. I tend to think it'll be closer to like 80% of Jonathan Taylor's full workload. So maybe we're talking about like a 50-50 split with him and Zach Moss, maybe a 60-40 split in favor of Jonathan Taylor. But even still, that makes him like a top 20 play for me because Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor. And I actually think this game also has like a 45-point over-under, and we could get a sneaky high-scoring game in this one as well. And with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, we know that if they get into the red zone, it's not going to be Anthony Richardson taking away red zone touches. It's going to go to Jonathan Taylor most likely, so I think he's a pretty solid option this week. If you're hesitant on the workload and you want to see it first, then definitely don't start him, but I do think he's a fine top 20 play for me. Then we get into the low-end RB2s tier. So the next tier that we're talking about here, Chuba Hubbard is my RB19 of the first guy of this tier here. Miles Sanders, like I said, in the injury portion, has been ruled out this week. So Chuba Hubbard is going to be alone in this backfield. And he's actually right now 6th in PFF rushing grade among all running backs right now. And he's 13th in rush yards over expected per attempt. So he's been really efficient on his touches this year. He's been much more efficient than Miles Sanders himself has been. It's a bad offense, and it's probably not going to be a good game script either against the Miami Dolphins. They're favored by like 2 touchdowns right now. But Chuba Hubbard is a mid RB2 this week because the Dolphins defense against the run is not very good. So if they can just hang in for even the first half, we should be able to see Chuba Hubbard have, potential upside to score a touchdown, potential upside as a pass catcher. Although, Bryce Young has struggled so far this year. I'm not expecting a ton of fireworks from this offense, but just stay in it long enough that we can get a good game out of Chuba Hubbard is pretty much all we need from the Carolina Panthers this week. So running back 20 for me on the week is Rachaad White. And the Lions have a pretty stout run defense, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back has been pretty solid in the last 2 games that I've seen from him so far, because I've not really been on the side of Rachaad White being like this great running back, and I still don't think he is, but I do think that he's gotten better. And I think from the Bucs perspective, this is a team that outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who with Mike Evans banged up right now, they do need somebody else to emerge in this offense. All we need Rachaad White to do is play like a guy who's slightly above average at running back. He doesn't need to be a stud. He doesn't need to be the best running back in the league. Just play as good as like David Montgomery is playing right now. Play as good as, some of these other backs. Raheem Mostert is playing right now in a worse offense, because Rachaad White is getting a superstar workload. This guy's gotten 70% of the snaps in every game so far this year. He's getting route participation that is legit comparable to some of the best running backs in fantasy. You guys can see his 72% route participation only trails Christian McCaffrey among like elite fantasy running back workloads like Bijan Robinson and Travis Etienne. Even those guys are not getting the same level of route participation that Rachaad White is getting. It's just tough because this guy is not the most instinctive runner. I hope the emphasis on the bye was to use him more in space, because he is very good as a receiver, and he's only been targeted on 11% of the Bucs targets right now, and that's a tad out underwhelming from honestly where I thought he was going to be entering the season. But as a running back in between the tackles, he's not that great. I need him to get more pass catching work going forward, and this game script could be in favor of that. Running back 21 for me here is Dameon Pierce. I think he's on the rise big time right now. The last 2 games, he's seen 20 or more carries, and the percentage usage you guys can see on the screen there is near 60% of the team snaps. Per PFF, his rushing grades and his missed tackles forced per attempt has also been drastically up the last 2 games than it was the first 3 games of the season. He is in the mid-70s in terms of PFF rushing grade the last 2 games, 23% missed tackles forced per attempt. As compared to in weeks 1 to 3, he was in the low 60s in PFF rushing grade and 15% missed tackles forced per attempt. That's a pretty big difference. So with Dameon Pierce, it's a brutal matchup against the New Orleans Saints. They're a tough run defense, but the game environment should make for a close game. I think that the Texans and the Saints are pretty evenly matched teams. It's a 1.5 point spread. The Texans are actually home underdogs, and they play pretty well at home, so I actually kind of like them to cover that and win the game straight up. But yeah, good news for Dameon Pierce that he is on the up right now. Running back 22 for me here is Brian Robinson. The Commanders have gotten blown out in 2 of their last 3 games, and as a result of that, you guys can see the usage there. We've seen a lot more of Antonio Gibson than I'm sure Brian Robinson managers want to see. This week against Atlanta, it should be a much more tightly contested game. I think these two teams are pretty comparable in terms of how good they are, with 2.5 points separating these guys on the Vegas open markets right now. I think that Brian Robinson and the Commanders will stay in this one. I like B-Rob to get back on track volume-wise, although it could be tough sledding efficiency-wise against a top 12 Atlanta Falcons run defense. Running back 23 for me on the week is Alexander Mattison. We talked about him on Wednesday's video as one of our biggest sell highs this past week. My advice on Alexander Mattison is if you have him and you're looking to sell high and nobody's biting, what I would suggest doing is waiting until after this game, because the Chicago Bears are the stone easiest matchup in the NFL for running backs. And I do think if the game script is positive for the Vikings, which I think it will be because I think they're a better team than the Chicago Bears, then we should see a spike in usage, maybe a spike in production for Alexander Mattison, and then you could use that to sell him off for somebody better. I still think he'll be a sell regardless of what he does in this game. But if you get a good week out of him, then it's possible that you can sell him for more. Although if he doesn't have a good week, he'll probably, vault all the way down the rankings, especially knowing the usage has been trending in the wrong direction. He came out the beginning of the season getting like 70+% of the snaps, and then the last 2 games since Cam Akers has been there, 66% and 53% of the snaps. That's why we're saying to sell this guy, because he's not a very good running back and he's no longer getting a superstar workload. So definitely try and sell him off if you can. And then closing out this tier of running backs, we have Deontay Foreman, who is alone in the Chicago Bears backfield. No Roschon Johnson, no Khalil Herbert. He's on IR right now. Roschon should be back next week because he's just coming off a concussion. The only active running backs on the Chicago Bears offense this weekend are Deontay Foreman and Darrington Evans. And we've seen Foreman fill in as a workhorse in the past. We saw it just last year in Carolina. He was like a borderline RB1 in a number of those weeks. He had a bunch of big performances with the Panthers last year in an offense led by like PJ Walker. So it's not like he's going from like a great offense to a bad offense. Both offenses were bad. This Vikings defense is typically one that you want to pass against. But I think given the Foreman, workload that we're probably about to see, he's still a top 24 running back in what should be a pretty good matchup for him there. Then we get into the flex plays here. We have Amari DiMercato kicking things off as my RB25 here. We do have Keontae Ingram active, so if you guys were wondering if he's going to be alone in this backfield, Keontae Ingram is going to be active despite missing the last 2 games with a neck injury. He wasn't even on the injury report, so he should be 100%. James Conner is now on IR, so we're going to have to figure out this backfield over the next couple weeks. DiMercato was the primary back in Conner's absence last week, and he played a 77% snap share. I don't think he's going to play that level of snaps again because I think Ingram will be more involved, but it is a brutal matchup against the second hardest fantasy running back rushing defense against the Los Angeles Rams. So if they get down big in this game and they can't run it in between the tackles, DiMercato is the pass catching back of this group. And I think that DiMercato is a startable RB3 flex option who could catch, 4 or 5 passes in this game, even if he's not very efficient on the ground and the Cardinals can't really move the ball. I think we could get some checkdowns and some garbage time touches for him in that case for sure. So running back 26 for me in my rankings is Ramondre Stevenson, who has been slowly losing work to Ezekiel Elliott over the past couple games. And of course, the Patriots offense is a complete dumpster fire. Mac Jones has gotten benched at the end of each of the last 2 games because they've been blown out by the Saints, blown out by the Cowboys. The Patriots have scored 1 offensive touchdown, which was like a busted coverage to Pharaoh Brown since week 2. So they are anemic on offense, to say the least, right now. This is a good matchup because, the Raiders are not a good team. They're not a very intimidating team, but I would have said that about the Saints last week. But even still, I can only trust Ramondre Stevenson as like a low-end flex play because I just don't want to trust this Patriots offense, and I think I would play probably like 35 to 40 wide receivers before my RB26 and Ramondre Stevenson here this coming week. You guys can see the workload has just not been the same since the first couple weeks of the season. He started off 70% of the snaps and that kind of thing, but it's just been deteriorating week over week, and somehow Ezekiel Elliott is getting work in the year 2023. Hopefully that goes back, but I'm not really holding my breath for Ramondre Stevenson right now. Running back 27 for me is Justice Hill. So Justice Hill, the Ravens backfield definitely requires some explanation here because let's backtrack. Week 1, we have J.K. Dobbins. He was the starter. He goes down, tears his Achilles. He's out for the year. In week 2, we come back. Justice Hill and Gus Edwards were the 2 big waiver ads. We see Justice Hill get a 55% opportunity share in that week 2 game. He gets all of the long down and distance work. He gets some goal line touches. Week 3, he's out. He's injured. He's dealing with a toe injury. Week 4, he's coming off of the injury. He doesn't have a full workload because he's working his way back and he's limited. And then week 5, he's back healthy. We saw him this past week post another 55% snap share game, and he saw similar usage to what we saw from him in week 2. So for me, I think the Ravens want Justice Hill to be the back here going forward. Yeah, Gus Edwards is going to be involved. Justice Hill's not like the safest play week over week, but I do think this is a pretty decent matchup for him to catch some passes in this London game against the Tennessee Titans. Then we have the running back 28 for me in my rankings is Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. He was a full go in his practices, so no worry about the knee injury that he was dealing with before the bye. Not listed on the final injury report. However, the offensive line is banged up, and P.J. Walker is starting at quarterback and not Deshaun Watson. It also sounds like Deshaun Watson could be out for multiple games going forward, according to Mary Kay Cabot, who covers the Browns professionally. They're going up against the 49ers, one of the best teams in the league, one of the best run defenses in the league. They're 10-point underdogs in this game. I do not think that Jerome Ford is a great play. I think I would play, like I said, like 40 receivers over him if it was a flex decision. Ford, if anything, is just a volume, hope for a touchdown type of play in your lineup this week. So I'm not excited about him, but he is inside my top 30 running backs. Running back 29 for me was Javonte Williams, who, of course, played on Thursday. He did come back. It was a split backfield between him, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Samaje Perine. But I do think Javonte Williams actually looked the best that he's looked so far this season, maybe turning a corner health-wise, although this team is a complete mess. It sounds like they're going to maybe trade Jerry Jeudy. It sounds like all these other running players that they have on their roster are on the chopping block or on the trade market. I think Javonte Williams is a sneaky buy, but I probably wouldn't pay a whole lot for him on the open market right now. And then closing out my top 30 running backs, we have Tajay Spears. And I think we should probably all know the story by now with how this backfield is going to go. If the Titans are losing, it's Tajay Spears. If the Titans are winning or it's a close game, it's Derrick Henry. And this week against Baltimore projects to be a closer game. They're 4-point underdogs. Who knows with London football, because sometimes it's a little wonky, but it's possible we get another negative game script in this one. And if they do have a negative game script, if Baltimore puts the brakes on them early, then Tajay Spears has, 6 target upside or 7 target upside like we've seen from him when the Titans get down early. So if you guys are really screwed at the running back position and you need even deeper plays than this, I have 5 or 6 deep league flex plays for you guys to close out my top 36. Although, we're getting to the point where I would probably start 50 or 55 receivers over some of these guys if I was deciding between, say, a Robert Woods and Jaleel McLaughlin or Zach Moss or Tyler Algier. Like, I would probably go with Robert Woods, just full disclosure. So Jaleel McLaughlin, of course, played on Thursday night, split the backfield with Javonte. Nothing really to report there. Zach Moss is in play if you guys are desperate, but Jonathan Taylor, like I said, should resume close to a full role, so I don't think Zach Moss is really playable this week, although he has been efficient, and maybe that's something that you just want to hang your hat on. The Falcons and the Commanders game script, like I said, projects to be close, so I think Tyler Algier is in play as a low-end flex play as a result of that, because when games have been close, we've seen Tyler Algier get a lot of run, get like 14, 15 carries when that happens, and he could find the end zone. Gus Edwards could find the end zone as well, even though he's splitting a backfield with Justice Hill. I suppose you could do worse. And then Kendre Miller, like I said, he looked great last week, but he probably won't be as involved this week because they were blowing out the Patriots. I think that's why Kamara wasn't playing. And then also, Keontae Ingram closes out my top 36. Now that he's healthy, I definitely prefer DeMercado this week, but I do think he's worth like a low-end desperation play if you guys are absolutely screwed at the running back position. So if you enjoyed this video, as always, if I gave you some good analysis, some good value, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here, and make sure to check out flockfantasy.com for all of our dynasty rankings, our redraft rankings, our rest of season rankings, everything that you guys could need. Our weekly rankings to help you with your start sits are available over there if you guys want to check that out. That will be linked down below in the pinned comment as well as the description. You can use the promo code FSE when you sign up on flockfantasy.com for 30% off any of the packages. If you sign up annually, you get 6 months for free and also a free Zoom consultation with myself or with Danny to talk about whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about your best ball teams, we'll talk about that. You want to talk about your dynasty teams, we'll talk about that. You have a bunch of trade offers on the table, we can talk about that as well. So if that interests you, check it out down below. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.